Hi guys, thanks for listening. Today we're going to be looking at another tip to help you avoid incidents, and today's tip is all about the inputs that we take in whilst we're using the road. And what do I mean by inputs? Well, we're talking about the inputs from all of our five senses, and we're saying how much do we use them five senses whilst we're driving, riding, using the road, and what's the quality of that. So when we look at those, we've obviously got observation, which we're going to go a bit more deeply into, but what's the quality and depth of observation? Then we've got things like hearing, very, very handy. Then we've got smell, taste a bit of an odd one, and of course feel. That might usually be its feel of the steering wheel, feel of the pedals, feel of the vehicle. It might be feeling the cold air against your face if you're walking or riding, etc. So it's a combination of all them things. Sounds obvious, but we don't always do that. A good example of this is the hearing side of things. I tend to, when I get into the car, wind my window down very slightly, and of course that gives me a better perception of sound. And what that means is, for example, I come to a junction that's very difficult to see at, of course I'm looking, but I'm also hearing as well. Again, that sounds obvious, but do you do that when you get into your vehicle? Are you aware of what's going on around you? Now, inevitably at high speed, that may be rendered useless because you just get a whistle at higher speed, so the window may go up in those particular situations. But you know, at slower speeds, they can probably remain down even very slightly, just to give us a better awareness. Now, the concept that I'd like to introduce you to is like a radar concept around the vehicle for all of your five senses. And what I mean by that is continuous scanning 360 degrees around the vehicle, and keeping up to date with what's there. And what I mean by up to date is how frequently we check those things. So, for example, if we check it every 5 seconds, we're then 5 seconds out of date in that location. And so that's one of the benefits of sound, of course, because that's continuous, assuming that we haven't got impairments there. So yeah, the radar concept. Now, one of the questions though is the length of that view in that 360, the length, distance in front, distance behind. Are we looking as far as we could? And of course, the further we look, I tend to start at the horizon and work my way back, but again it depends on scenario, because sometimes the closer stuff is more imperative to focus on, and of course I've usually dealt with that beforehand because I've seen it far enough in advance. But if we start at the horizon and work our way back, we're thinking, okay, you know, what's coming up in the next mile rather than the next metre or 10 metres. Then we've got width on view, you know, are the buildings either side, where are the exits and entrances to those buildings, is there a tree line or a hedge line coming in, that's probably a junction, etc. We may be able to see that the traffic's moving or stopped on the motorway if we look a bit wider, but of course we don't want to be distracted by that too long, which is why we continue that radar situation around the vehicle. Behind, again, how frequently is that? If emergency services show up, how long does it take you to react? If it takes you a while, if you've been shocked by the fact there's emergency services behind you, probably need to increase the quantity of your mirrors. And so that's what we're looking at behind. And how far behind are we looking? Are we looking a mile? Or is it just a car length? Is it 2 car lengths? Is it just 2 cars? Can we look behind a little bit further? And of course that gives you better awareness of what's around the vehicle. The next bit is to read into some of those things, and Roadcraft's very good at this because it describes 3 things we can do with that. So we've got environmental, physical and moving hazards. And when we look at environmental, we're talking about microclimates, so overhanging trees maybe, where we have high contrasts. I tend to drive with my lights on most of the time, which means that we can be seen. Fantastic, conspicuous. But also, as we enter that section, is it icy, is it cold, is it damp, is it wet, whereas beforehand it was in bright sunshine. So we're going to have that change in contrast and the change of environment as we go through that section. So definitely something to think about. And of course we're going to have impeded view through the trees width-wise. Then we've got physical objects, things like the road itself, buildings, trees. We have you know, road markings and signs, and of course all of those are fixed objects, quite useful to take in. Read into it, you know, if the road surface is bumpy, why is that? Is it a not very well used road, or is it very well used? Road signs, what does the rec say? It's a junction on the left, I can't see it, so where is it? The buildings, if it's an industrial building, are there heavy goods coming? That type of thing. We also have, you know, residential areas, so what does that mean? Are there going to be children about? Is there going to be a school? A church is a good one to look out for, by the way, on buildings, because that gives you an idea of a centre of town or a village. It can be seen from really far away because you've usually got quite a large steeple. It's usually on Church Road or Church Lane or near a school, and it's also near a pub and a crossroads very often as well. So great identification, and of course very often you're entering a 30 mile an hour if you've got a church steeple on the horizon. So something to look at. And of course then, on top of all that information, we need to take into account moving objects, which are probably the most complex and most difficult things for a human to comprehend, because we don't know where the next object's going to move, other road users, animals, etc. So we need to anticipate that well. Very hard to do, and we're going to give you some tools for that as we go through this series of videos, so keep listening out for that. So those are the type of things I look out for. Finally, of course, we need to be aware that we can be distracted away from them five senses very, very easily, and of course things like drink, drugs, general distractions and things. So we want to remain focused on that 360-degree view, radar effect. So that's top tip number 2. Thanks for listening today. There's going to be plenty more to come over the coming weeks, so keep listening out. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to make some comments below if you've got anything to add to this or any suggestions, and then of course please subscribe as well to the channel. Thanks for listening today, and yeah, keep in contact. Thank you.